Hey everyone, I'm Stephanie, host and head bookologist here at the Get Literate podcast. I'm a book loving, notebook hoarding reader and writer on a mission to change lives one book and one notebook at a time. On this podcast, we explore the power of bookology. What's that? That's the study of books and reading and notebooks and writing mixed with mindful practices and creativity to create lives we love. Here, you'll find episodes exploring the reading and writing life and how they can make our actual lives better. You'll get book recommendations and notebooking prompts around particular themes, and you'll even hear from authors and special guests who can fuel our reading and writing hearts and help us take inspired action in our own daily practices. So, grab a notebook and your TBR list, and let's get literate. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Get Literate podcast. I cannot wait to share today's episode with you. I have been doing a deep dive into the analytics of the podcast. I do this often to see which podcast episodes are resonating with you, what you might want more of, how I can use it to plan out my calendar. But I took an even deeper dive recently to see what you're loving the most, what you're listening to the most, which episodes you're commenting on, responding to, sharing with others, that kind of thing. And even though I started this podcast with a focus primarily on reading, the podcast has grown over time, as I have, into a podcast that celebrates reading and writing to make life better. And some of your favorite episodes, the most downloaded episodes, are my writing and notebooking episodes, especially the episodes that focus on writing for mental health, writing as therapy, and writing to heal. And that's exactly what we are going to dive a little bit deeper into. So, to kick off the episode, I want to share a childhood memory with you. So, years and years and years ago, I'm talking, I don't know my exact age at the time, but I'm guessing I was single digits. I was probably 8 or 9, maybe I was 10. So I was young. And I was spending time at my aunt's house, as I often did. I had a lot of aunts, one uncle, a lot of cousins, and we were all really close when we were young. And I was at my aunt's house and I was drawing. I remember other cousins were doing other things. I was sitting not on the couch, but on the floor in front of the couch, kneeling on the coffee table. And I was drawing, which is what I often did. Now, I know words are most important to me now, but back then, my notebooks were filled with drawings and doodles. I had really cool puppies that I could draw. I knew how to draw 3D boxes, and I loved experimenting with writing my name in different doodly fonts, which shows why I love hand lettering so much. One of the things that I loved to draw was abstract drawings. And I think I love drawing abstract drawings because I really wasn't good enough to draw something that was recognizable. So I would just spend a lot of time doodling all over the page until the page was completely full of shapes and lines and squigglies and paths and connections and all sorts of things that I eventually would color in so that it looked kind of like a mosaic. And I remember this one day, my cousin asked me what I was drawing, and I came over and I showed my cousin and my aunt, and I was like, here it is. And I remember my cousin asking, what is that? What is that a drawing of? And you know what, everyone? I don't know where this came from, but I remember it distinctly. I said, well, it's kind of like life. And my 9 or 10-year-old, wisdom, like, what? What do you mean life? I was like, well, it's just a whole bunch of things and it's all over the place. And I really don't know what it is, but it looks kind of cool and there's lots of windy paths. And so that's what I'm calling it. And I remember my cousin looking at me and going, that's weird. And from that point on, I never shared my twisty, turny, doodly drawings uh, ever again. Now, I still drew like that all the time. That actually was my preferred mode of doodling, which is to just doodle nothing and to see what came out, what shapes popped up, what patterns popped up. It was just a process oriented piece because I could never do a product oriented piece. It was just lots of lines and shapes and colors, no rules, but I did love symmetry. I love doing the same thing on both sides of the paper or having it look balanced in some way. I always did. And for some reason, this doodling was just really soothing for me. I was an anxious kid, right? Always have been, probably always will, still be a fairly anxious adult. And it just made me feel better. Now, when I look back on that now, I can see why. Right? It was a calming activity. My hands were moving. It was meditative. The shapes were soothing. And now, when we think about the industry that is adult coloring books, right, I can see why that was helpful. But now, as I am older, and what I realized recently in my yoga training actually was that those drawings that I was doing, they were a particular kind of drawing, a particular kind of therapy, a particular kind of art that has been rooted in history for centuries across various cultures, and I didn't know it. So, what is it called? What are these kinds of drawings called? They're called mandalas. Mandalas are typically circular designs. They're really intricate in some cases. As I've mentioned, they've been used for centuries in various cultures. And in Sanskrit, mandala means circle or center. So picture a circle on a page, and then inside that circle are very interesting, cool to look at, intricate, and symmetrical designs. That's the key piece, the symmetrical design. So what you see on one half of the circle, you see on the other. What you see on the inner core of the circle is all the way around 360 degrees. What you see on the outside of the circle is the same all the way around 360 degrees. And it turns out that mandalas are an underused, under-talked about, underutilized form of meditation and self-expression, and yes, healing. So Carl Jung, the famous psychologist back in the day, he actually introduced the idea of mandalas into Western psychology. And what he said is that these mandalas were a reflection of self. It allowed us to bring our unconscious thoughts and our unconscious emotions to light on the page. And when I read that, I thought, oh my gosh, that kind of is what I was doing. I was just unconsciously choosing certain shapes and choosing certain colors. And if I knew back then that the shapes and colors that I chose had meaning, I bet you I could make more sense out of it so that my cousin wouldn't think that I was weird. And instead, I was just the cool girl way ahead of her time. So Carl Jung says that when we create, especially when we create these mandalas, we enter a state of flow. Why? Because of the repetition, because of that meditative state that we are getting in, doing the same thing over and over in the present moment without worry of everything else that's going around. It's coming. It's a space where stress and anxiety can fade away. And that is exactly what I felt as a kid. So, how can that help mental health? Well, obviously, as I just mentioned, it is a stress and anxiety relief practice. The repetitive patterns and the symmetry engage our focus and engages our focus so much that we are more mindful and we are more present because we're concentrating on the drawing. We're concentrating on that symmetry, right? We aren't able to ruminate about the past or worry about the future when we are instead focused on how we're going to fill our circle with that symmetry. Now, mandalas are also a form of self-expression, and we could say emotional processing, right? Our doodles on the page do have unconscious meaning. And you could take a deep dive into the kinds of lines you write, the kinds of shapes you include, the colors you end up coloring your mandala with. Those all have meaning. And you can either create a mandala just pouring it all out and not thinking about this and then reflect later on what your choices might mean. Or you can think about the emotions that you have inside and what you want to communicate. And you can actually choose particular shapes and colors to represent that and help that emotion move through your body. Now, on top of all of that, mandalas can give us a really great sense of accomplishment. I mean, creating one, looking at it when you're done, it just feels really good. At least it does to me. And so there are so many benefits of doodling and creating these mandalas to our mental health. And so that's what I want you to think about today. Have you ever doodled like this? Have you ever created a mandala? Have you ever just drawn a circle on a piece of paper, on a sticky note, on an index card, on the back of an envelope, and just started doodling in it? You are creating a mandala. You are doing something that is actually good for your mental health. And so I want to challenge you this week to consider making one. And so I want to walk you through a couple of steps for that. So if you want to give this very therapeutic technique a try, right? You just need a couple of things. You need a piece of paper, right? You could do it in your notebook. You could get a piece of computer paper. You could get a large sticky note, the back of an envelope, anything that's available to you that you could doodle on. Now, I like doing mine with pencil. I love my mechanical pencils. I think you know that about me. But you should choose whatever writing utensil feels really good to you. If you're using pencil, get an eraser. I will talk about this in a little bit because mandalas are not meant to be perfect. And okay, I'm just going to stop talking about that because we'll talk about that in a minute. So you need paper, you need a pencil, you need an eraser or your preferred writing utensil if that's what you would like to do. And you're going to need some coloring materials for the end. It could be crayons, it could be markers, it could be gel pens, it could be, I don't know, it could be pastels, it could be oils. I guess it could be watercolor, although that may be difficult in the small, intricate lines, but just something to bring your mandala to life with color. Okay, so you have your materials. Here's what you do. You draw a circle on your page. You can pick how big it is. If you want to do this for a good chunk of time and really let yourself get into a meditative state, then pick a regular sized piece of paper and make a circle to almost completely fill it. If you want to start small because you're a little overwhelmed and you know you're a perfectionist and you want to make sure you get it so-called right, maybe you start with a small circle. That's what I would recommend for those of you that are saying, but I'm not an artist, but what if it's not perfect? And what if it's not symmetrical? Yes, mandalas are about the beautiful symmetry, but they're more about the process. So draw a circle somewhere on the page. Next, divide your circle into equal sections because this is going to help you with that symmetry. Now, you can decide how to divide it up. Do you want to put in, let's see, I almost said an X. I guess you could do an X and divide it into 4 sections. Do you want to just put a T in the middle of it and do your 4 sections that way? Do you want to divide it up like a pie and have 8 sections or 6 slices? Or maybe you want to do it completely different and you just want to draw smaller circles within it so that you can get a sense of the sections. Or maybe you want to do all of those things. Now, typically, you divide that circle with very light pencil, right? Because you typically don't want to see those divider lines in your mandala, but maybe you do. Maybe that is part of what you're creating. That's okay too. So you have your circle, you divide your circle into equal sections, and now you create. Now, the recommendation is that you start at the center of your circle. So maybe you put a little dot in the middle of your circle and you just start drawing. You just start doodling and you go outward. Okay, so the trick is you want to doodle something around that dot that is symmetrical all the way around. And then you go out a little bit wider and you draw something else in one of those sections and then make it symmetrical all around. So you're basically making these circular designs and going out and out and out until your circle is full. And do you have to do it that way? Of course not. It's your mandala. You can do whatever you want. It's your mental health. You could create your mandala slice by slice by slice if you are making your pie, right? Or you could do what I said is typically recommended, which is start in the middle and make your circular designs. It really is your choice. You can use lines, you can use loops, you can do any sort of geometric design, you can do petals, you can make up your own shapes. That's the beauty of it. Now, as I said, mandalas are meant to be symmetrical because if we're doing the same thing in repetition, that is what is kicking us into that meditative state so that our emotions can come front and center. But please, please, please do not stress about making this perfect. Okay? I'm talking to some of you directly right now, and you know who you are. Do not worry about making this perfect. When I was a kid, there was symmetry, but we're going to define symmetry very loosely. Right? I just had fun putting those shapes on the page. So while the symmetry helps us get into that meditative state, if that is stressing you out, don't do it. Don't stress about it. When I look at every single mandala that I have made, especially the ones that I made recently in anticipation of engaging in that experience for this episode, they are not perfect. And that's okay. Perfection is not the point. It's the process of creating them that is good for our mental health. And no one's going to see them, unless you want them to, of course. No one's going to see them. Now, once you're done, right? Once you have all of your symmetrical shapes, as much and as close as you can without worry, and your circle is complete, now you're going to add colors. And you can do this any way you want. You can keep those colors symmetrical all the way around. Maybe you're not feeling all that symmetrical and all that calm and meditative. And so you just put the colors wherever the heck you want them, whether they're symmetrical or not. Maybe you choose colors that represent how you are feeling in this very moment because you want to express those, get them to leave your body. Maybe you want to choose colors that will help you grow into the feeling you want. You want to feel calmer or happier or more excited. And so you choose colors that represent those feelings. And that's it. When you are done, you take a step back, you take a deep breath, and you celebrate, right? That sense of accomplishment that I mentioned, you just look at it and say, wow, look at that. It looks pretty good. It looks pretty cool. But more importantly, that was fun. That was productive. That was cathartic. How do you say that word? Cathartic? Cathartic? That was helpful. We'll go with. And you can reflect, right? You could use this mandala to now sit and reflect in your head of what you're experiencing, or you could even take it to your notebook, right? So maybe you talk about what emotions came up when you were creating your mandala, right? Were you relaxed or were you feeling stressed about the symmetry? What does that say about you and your state of mind right now? You could look at the patterns that you chose. Why do you think you chose those certain shapes and lines? What do they represent now when you look at them, right? What did you learn about yourself based on what came up on the page? And you also can think about, how does this mandala make me feel? How did I feel making it? And now how do I feel looking at it? And what might the mandala be trying to tell me? But I love that wooey question. What is our book stack trying to tell us? If our book stack could talk, what would it say? If our notebook could talk, what would it say? If our mandala was trying to tell us a message, what would it be? It's been said, if you dive into some of the literature on the mandalas, that when you create one, it is an echo of your soul. Isn't that beautiful? An echo of your soul. And so if you take the time to reflect on that process and what you see on the page in front of you, you're getting closer to you on the inside, right? And feeling really good in the process. I mean, doesn't it just sound fun? Doesn't it sound relaxing, sound therapeutic? Of course, once you put any of those perfectionistic tendencies aside. I'm hoping that some of you want to try making one. And here's the thing. If you are in my Get Literate Substack community, my private community, then spoiler alert, on Sunday, you are going to get an audio post where I guide you through a meditative mandala creating experience. I will walk you through it step by step by step so that you can experience the true meditative practice of doing this kind of work. We start with breathing, we do a body scan and inventory what we're feeling, and then I walk you through all those steps of starting with the circle and dividing it up, adding your patterns, adding your colors, and we end with a notebooking session at the end of the session. So if you're already there, that is coming to you on Sunday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, as always. And if you're not there, but you want to get your hands on that meditation, and I hope you do, you can join us. You can go to getliterate.co, you can go to alitlife.substack.com, or you can click the link in the show notes. And for just $5 a month, you can get that episode and the hundreds of episodes that have come before it, like book calendars, book clubs, and notebooking prompts, bonus episodes, and all sorts of things. Now, I want to say a couple more things about mandalas before we close. Mandalas can be created anytime. At any time. You do not need a special chunk of time and a special state of mind to start these mandalas. You could just start doodling literally right now if you are in a space where you can, right? So if you're experiencing a time of stress, grab a piece of paper and start doodling a mandala. If you are happy and creative and you want to give it a try, grab a piece of paper and start drawing a mandala. Maybe you're in a Zoom meeting, like I often am, and on your notebook where you're taking notes of that Zoom meeting, you've got a little mandala going in the corner, right? You can be really intentional about these mandalas, and you can create them in your notebook so that you can save them and see your growth in mandalas over time, right? You could get full on creative and get out some watercolor papers and art sketch pads and get full on creative with your materials if you would like. Or you could just grab a sticky note and you could do it on that and be done with it. Now it's the creation of the mandala, okay, that is really important to the mental health aspect of this practice. But if that stresses you out, if you don't think you can possibly make one, even starting small on a little sticky note, you might start by going online and finding some pre-existing mandalas that other people have already created and start by just coloring those. Layering on the coloring to a mandala someone else created could be a nice first step. It's that adult coloring book vibe. And then once you find some positive effects of that practice, maybe you would be ready to take the leap into your own mandala drawing. So these mandalas, right? This process, it is simple, yet it is a profound tool for helping our mental health. It can help us de-stress. It can help us set intention. It can help us reflect, or it could just be a really fun, creative activity. I hope that you will give this a try this week. I hope that you will join me in my Substack community to get the full guided mandala meditation coming your way soon. And if you do give it a try, I would love to know about it. As always, find me at alitlife.com and tell me what you're up to in the show notes. Snap a picture of a mandala that you have created and send it to me in a direct message on your favorite social platform. You can find me at my Facebook group, the A Lit Life Facebook group, and send it there, or just press play on that audio comment and talk to me about the experience. I hope that this has piqued your interest, and I hope that you have another tool that you can put in your toolbox for supporting your mental health through our notebooking. Thanks for listening, everyone. Have so much fun creating these mandalas, and I will see you in the next episode. Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Get Literate podcast. You'll find links to all the books, resources, and ideas mentioned in the show notes and at alitlife.com. And if you want more, you might like to join my Patreon community. There, you'll find additional inspiration for your reading and writing life, like bonus podcast episodes, book calendars, monthly book clubs, notebooking inspiration, live events, giveaways, and more. It's only $5 a month, and you get instant access to all of the previous content too. Learn more at getliterate.co. And one more thing, if you love what you listened to today, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast, or take a screenshot of the episode and text it to a friend. This helps the podcast grow, and it builds our bookish and notebookish community too. Thanks for listening.